So let me talk to you a few minutes and just kind of explain the campaign to give you kind of the inside view. You are part of our church family, and I want to make sure that you are hearing and understanding and equipped to be able to understand what we will be doing this fall. Some of you, you might remember in a message I've shared before, I took high school biology twice. Not by choice, but I did take it twice, and I remember I actually liked it. It was quite enjoyable. And I just didn't do assignments or homework because I thought that was unnecessary. But I did take it twice, and I remember going through the study of the body. And I remember I was absolutely mesmerized by that, both times. What blew me away over and over was the incredible complexity and frankly, how many things can go wrong. When you go through high school biology, they start talking about all these systems and the immune system and how everything, really, frankly, and honestly, what was happening in my brain was, how do any of us survive? Like, how do we live even, out of the womb for how do we get here even? It is so incredible how many things in your body can go wrong. The second thing I remember was the beauty of design. In fact, my high school biology teacher was an atheist, and she was open about that. And I remember just feeling after she would teach us, I remember just sitting there in the seat as a high schooler, and remember thinking, how? Like, how do you do that? How do you see and understand the beauty and complexity of the design of the body and deny the creator behind all of that? Because it is so unbelievably complicated and beautiful at the same time. Now, it's no wonder that the Apostle Paul used the analogy of the body to describe this thing we call church. The connection, the connection of the community of believers who come together to fulfill the mission of God on earth. Because it is at both the same time, it is both incredibly delicate and fraught with problems, would you agree? And yet at the same time, when it's working right, it's beautiful. Now, in my experience, and maybe in your experience, I've seen both. I've been a part of a church where things weren't working right, and things were attacking the body, and it was coming apart, and it was literally sick. And I've been a part of a church where it was coming together and doing it right. Now, most of you have heard, obviously, you've been to 101. You know the story of Oak Ridge. But I want to give you a little bit of my perspective. I call it the tale of two churches, because in 1997 and 1998, you know the story of Oak Ridge, that at Oak Ridge it was going through an incredible time of division, and the leadership had left the church, and there were people, it was a very painful environment, and the church dwindled down and it nearly died. And so you pretty much know that story. But at the same time, in 1997 and 98, at the same time, my church, the church that Lisa and I were going to, not ORBC, but NRHBC, North Richland Hills Baptist Church, in those same 2 years, was going through an incredible time of pain and conflict and difficulty. In 1997, our senior pastor, the lead pastor of that church at that time, had a moral failure. And as you can imagine, it set the church into a very difficult season. And the church really suffered from that, the integrity of the at the top. And then when they found a new senior pastor and brought him on board, an interesting thing happened. Because in the Bible Belt where I came from, this was a larger church, and so they had multi-staff. And the minister of music, that's the title we used to call worship leaders a long time ago. The minister of music stayed. Now, he had been on staff for 25 years, so he'd been around a while. And we had a choir that was about 200 people in the choir. And so he had an incredible record of influence. Well, when the new pastor came, they began to have a conflict between the new pastor and the existing music minister. music minister, and the music minister made a decision that he was going to have a standoff with him. And it literally became a declaration of war. And that church became a very, very uncomfortable place. Now, this very large church, one night, in the kind of the climax of this, while Lisa and I are preparing to leave Maryland to start in the ministry, they called a business meeting. We did not attend because we're like, hey, we're leaving. But we did hear the result and the outcome. And the outcome of that was that the pastor was going to begin explaining what was going on in the church, and the choir members, 200 or 300 of them, decided to make it a moment of a statement. And so in a business meeting, they began to come down the aisles, and one at a time they came up to the platform and went by the pastor, pushing, shoving, and one of them spitting in his face. Yeah, this is the environment that was going on at the church that we left. Now, the reason I tell you that, and the reason it's important you understand the background and the history of Oak Ridge, is that there are some things that God burned into my soul in my Christian journey. And some of the things that he burned into my soul was just this sense of, God, I made a promise to God while I was in seminary. If you ever give me the privilege of leading a church, I promise you, God, that I will do everything in my power to make the church healthy and to keep it focused on the mission. So these experiences in my past and then the experiences of Oak Ridge's past kind of brought us to a point where the mission was the most important thing. So when I arrived in 1999, the church actually had already gone through the season of pruning and difficulty, and had what I found when I came here was a group of folks who were really excited, that had gone through brokenness, but they were hopeful. And what I found in this church were that the people that were left were people who were filled with love and passion and a desire to do whatever it takes. That's what I experienced when I came. In fact, when I first came, I remember getting that call from Scott Kesey sitting up here, and I remember Scott, inviting me to come out in view of a call. That's what us Baptists used to call that, and I stayed at his house. That's where I stayed. In fact, it was a good experience. Lisa fell down the stairs. I remember that, and and we lost your wedding ring. I still remember that one, too. We searched for that for hours. So this was your introduction of your new pastor, And so, what we found, though, was immediately we decided that, God was going to do something great. Now, sometimes I get asked this. People ask about the church size. And I've mentioned before, they were running about 35 on a weekend. But of the 35 in attendance, there were 28 members. When I first came, I asked the first secretary for the roll, and I looked through the roll. There were 28 members that I kind of started with in this church. And people ask me all the time, say, well, what happened to the original members of the church? Well, I looked it up this week. 2 of them left during the transition in the first few years. They couldn't handle the transitions. They said, this ain't my kind of Southern Baptist church, and they left. And that's okay, but only 2. 2 have moved over the years. 12 have died. 12 of them have gone home to be with the Lord, and 12 are still attending Oak Ridge Baptist Church. Is that crazy? Now, I'm going to embarrass them because some of them are here tonight. So Evelyn Dix is sitting over here with Miss Louise. Yep. And Debbie Taylor. Where's Debbie? I know you're here somewhere. There's Debbie right there. And Vernon and Betty, you're right back here. There's Vernon and Betty. My wife is watching Vernon, keeping an eye on him tonight. Rick and Rosie Goodyear. I don't know. There they are. Okay. I'd assumed I would have heard Rosie by now, but... Oh, sorry. Scott and Jenny, yeah, and Scott and Jenny Kesey. Richard and Debbie Mills are right here. And then finally, Jeannie Chase, and I know you're back here. And now of those, they may not know this. I don't know if you do or not, but Evelyn is the longest standing member still. So, yes, Evelyn. let's see if you know this. She joined February 18th, 1976. Wow, pretty cool, pretty cool, pretty cool. So I came, and there was this group of folks who said, we're not sure what to do. And what's funny is that their pastor was that way as well. I'm not sure what to do, but we had a heart to do whatever we needed to do. And so you know the stories about the first two conferences at Willow Creek with a group of 9,000 pastors. We were challenged to dream of what a church could look like if it was fully functional. If it was doing as designed by Jesus, what would it look like? And I wrote kind of that manifesto on the plane back of I dream of a church, and I literally wrote it out in the 5 purposes. Now, when I got back, I was like, I have a dream, but I don't know how to do it. And so the next conference was that purpose-driven conference, and we attended that early on. In 1999, it was the end of the year. We went to Annapolis, and we walked out of that conference together unanimously with a spirit that said, I don't know how to do the things they just said, but I'm willing to give my life to make that happen. And we kind of joined together as a pact to say, we will do whatever it takes to reach people for Jesus Christ. And frankly, that's what we've been doing over the last 19 years. We've been doing whatever it takes. So tonight, what I wanted to do for you was just hit you with the history in 4 stages and let you see what God has been taking us through. And I'm just going to take this through the stages of the year divisions and how I label those. Now, for reference, I want you to look at page 6 and 7 of the brochure, because this is what we've given you inside of this brochure, is kind of this overview. And we have poured blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that as well as we possibly can, we've given you the full picture of where we've been so that you can understand where we're headed. So let me just summarize. The first group of years from 1999 to 2004, and then the next years of 2005 to 2010. Then I'm going to talk about 2011 to 2016, and then finally, I'll talk about 2017 today. So let me just summarize these. The first 6 years of RBC, the Dixon Road years, I call those the years of strategic growth. What happened during those first years was we transitioned a church from traditional to a full purpose-driven church. And it took us 6 years to do that. It took some time to make all of those changes. What happened during that season was that we had almost uncontrollable growth. It was very difficult in the early years. We went from dead to doubling almost every year for 6 years. Now, our first 2 responses to that were the first 2 capital campaigns. This is my 5th capital campaign with Oak Ridge. I've had others in previous churches, but let me kind of give you the overview of those. They're in the book, but the very first one was called Building for Life, and what God taught us with the very first campaign was He taught us the principle of sacrificial giving, above and beyond giving to accomplish a great dream and a great mission. And it unified our church like nobody's business. We doubled the size of that existing sanctuary, and the first Sunday we opened, we were out of room. So, but what God had taught us was that first lesson, that it requires giving. So we responded a couple of years later with a campaign called Growing with God, and that's where we made the decision that we were going to sell the old location and move. Now, in that campaign, what God taught us clearly was He taught us the principle of faith, because I'll just be honest with you, it wasn't that hard for me to move the church because I didn't have the memories, but it was hard for them. And I remember talking to Vernon specifically on the last day, and it was hard. And so these guys are my heroes because that's hard. When you have so many memories connected to something and you're like, you know what? We have so much history here and so many roots and so many memories, but we're still willing to do whatever it takes. And so by faith, honestly, we didn't really know where we were going. That's the truth. When we left there, what we said was, we're too small to just go out and buy something big. but we've outgrown the place we're. So what do you do in those in-between awkward years? So we decided we would rent. And so I remember telling the team then, I said, I need something, I don't know, 30,000 square foot. I'm literally making it up as I go along. And within less than a week, Charlie George comes back and he says, found it. It was 29,754. He didn't meet the goal, but, it was pretty close. So he said, found it, and he said, I'll take you over there. And we went over there to this shopping center, and it was literally boarded up, and it looked like it would probably be a good place for a crack house and, Breaking Bad scene. I don't know what it was. So I said, well, can we get in? So we're ripping a board off to get inside this building, and the whole thing was gutted completely. It was a complete shell, and I stepped in, and it goes, whoosh, and I'm not joking, there was about an inch of dirty, nasty, molded water, standing water on the floor. No light, so you couldn't see, and the floor, so you could slip. So it was a mess when we came in, and I said, well, you found something. Yeah. But here's what happened. The price was right. So we were like, okay, this is a huge step of faith, but here's the deal. And when we got together, we said this. We said, you know what? We're not staying. So it's no big deal. All we're going to do is rent a place and go find some land and build a building, because that's what churches do. And that was literally the plan. So part of what we decided strategically to do was that since we weren't going to be here for 2-3 years, since that, we decided to kind of cut corners on construction. So literally, there are ceilings in this building that only by the grace of God has it not fallen in on you. How do I know that? I hung them. I have never done construction in my life. And I'm up on ladders hanging, so I'm like, I got to be out of my mind doing this. So we're like, it's just temporary. So when we moved to the shopping center, those next 6 years, I call them the years, the first 3 years were the years of strategic growth. The next years I call the years of staff and ministry growth. Because what happened during those next 6 years was we exploded in ministries. And I'm like, holy smokes, I can't take care of all this. So we just started hiring staff as fast as we could. And it was a huge explosion of growth during that time. Now, about 2 years later, you know the story. The next capital campaign came up because the shopping center came up for sale. And when we ran the numbers, we said, it makes sense to stay. Thank God we stayed. Honestly, thank God we stayed, because I talk to pastors all the time that would kill for what we have in space. So we stayed. So we held the next campaign called Dare to Dream, and what Dare to Dream taught us was, and those of us that were here for Dare to Dream, they still talk about the moment. And here's what Dare to Dream taught us, that God can still do miracles. Because this church raised millions of dollars in cash and in pledges, when frankly, if you look around at us, we're not a wealthy church. That's not kind of our DNA of who we are. But the people gave sacrificially in ways that were astounding. So Dare to Dream gave us the permanency. So we said, we're staying, and we're expanding, so we expanded down the way. But what we also knew in the background was that there is a lid. Because when we came here, we designed this place to be sized for 600 adults, 250 children. Because we thought, shoot the moon. I'm not even joking. Those were the parameters that we used to kind of say, that ought to do us. It ought to do us. So as you can imagine, once we stayed, it became problematic, and we knew we were going to hit a lid. So we planned for Expand the Dream. Expand the Dream happened in 2010, and in 2010, we wanted to raise the money to build a new building out on the land, and then once that phase is complete, we would renovate for family space. Now, here's what we learned in Expand the Dream. Expand the Dream taught us that God is in control of the pathway to the dream. So those were some difficult years for me because I was like, man, we just got to move forward, got to move forward, got to move forward. And God took me to the book of Exodus. And here's what I learned in Exodus. You know, when the people left Egypt on their way to the Promised Land, do you know how long it would actually take to get to Canaan? 11 days. Do you know how long it took them to get there? 40 years. Yeah, 40 years. Now, what I also know, and you know when you read the book of Exodus, is that God was leading them as a fire by night, cloud by day. So God was actually in control of the GPS. So in other words, God actually knows what he's doing. So what happened for us is the path included some twists and turns and ups and downs that we didn't really like. So the next 6 years, 2011 to 16, I labeled those Kmart and Chaos. And it was a season of structural growth. Now, if any of you have had teenagers, you know that there is a season that you go through growth that's painful, like it's not fun, right? And there's some painful growth that you need to go through to get there. We went through some painful growth during that season. God knew what he was doing, though. So 3 challenges we faced during that season was we hit the capacity that we had planned for. We knew it was coming. We knew it would happen. We hit it. And in 2014, we hit the ceiling for what we could pull off on this campus, and we bounced off of it. Now, we were trying to avoid that because we knew if you get ahead of this thing, you can continue to accommodate for growth, and you don't slow momentum. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So we hit the lid that we planned and that we knew was coming. The second thing, that the challenge, was the shopping center sale that was contingent for the next phase. We went through 4 cycles of very difficult near sales, not sale, near sale, not sale, and it was a tough season. And the next challenge we went through was some staff transitions. Now, I've shared with the board the analogy of what I felt like during those years was like you're on a raft together, and you know where you're headed, and you can see the island in the distance, and you're rowing, and all of a sudden, the waves start hitting. And when the waves start hitting, you feel it, and you're like, oh, and people are throwing up, and people are jumping off, and that's kind of what we went through, that we had to get through this season. And so we went through some staff transition, and then the last, just to, as a cherry on top, we had to close a campus. Just because I wasn't suicidal yet. I was at a point of like, gosh, God, what are you doing? I don't understand. You told us you want us to go this direction, but yet we're going every other direction. I don't understand. And so at the end of 2013, I called the staff together. I called the leaders of the church. I said, we stop everything. Because when you don't understand what God's up to, you pause. Now, when you hit conflict in your life, and you see very clearly that it's not happening the way you want or what you think God wants to, there's 1 of 2 reasons. Either it's spiritual warfare and you need to press through, or it's God is up to something and you press pause. And so we press pause. We say, God, we're going to stop. It's your church. You can sell your church in a New York second if you wanted to. So if you don't want to do that, what do you want us to do? And he clearly had us pause for a reason. Now, some of the reason I want to share with you real quickly is that God did other things through Expand the Dream. So let me share with you just a few of those. Even though God decided it wasn't time to just build a building, that wasn't the entirety of the vision. That wasn't the everything that we said we wanted to accomplish. So let me share a few of those. Now, on page 7, you'll see all of them written out. I encourage you to read those, but let me just summarize quickly a few of those. We made the capital investments that were parts of the master plan that didn't need the building for the next phase. So, for example, we transformed the lobby in 2011. We built the theater venue in 2014. We refreshed all of the children's areas in 2015. We created a video studio in 2016 to begin producing video materials, and we did the Ridge renovation in 2017. So we continued moving forward on the pieces of the master plan that we didn't have to be contingent on. And in the crowd, we saw amazing things as well. The venue model opened doors for us that increased the health. So for example, when we opened the theater, the attendance from video venue to theater doubled immediately. So we saw that there was something to the venue model. And it was more than just having a video feed. It's much, much more. In fact, by the way, the theater venue, they got 11, just so you know, of the quiz questions. So I'm just saying, there's something about the room. I don't know what it is, but we upgraded the children and teen curriculum to the orange curriculum. And the biggest thing is that it opened up the opportunity for Santa's Wonderland. So in other words, the renovation stuff allowed us a better flow in the building for Santa's Wonderland. Can I just tell you, I looked at the numbers today. Do you know how many people came into this church and went through the doors of this church since we started Santa's Wonderland? 18,243. No, let's try that again. 18,243 because of Santa's Wonderland. It's pretty amazing. It is not uncommon for me to have lobby conversations and say, hey man, how'd you hear about Oak Ridge? Santa's Wonderland. The caring initiatives multiplied through our solutions ministries with Scott Elliott, the care groups in all of the grief share and divorce care. We multiplied ministry, the marriage ministry with Bambi opening up and training mentors to do marriage mentoring. Amazing. The landing launched for hurting teenagers. How many of us know they need some help right now? The landing opened, and when we called Saddleback to say, hey, we're starting to grow to this level, can you help us out? And they said, you have how many? Well, we have this many. And they said, you're the largest one in the nation. Like, can you tell us how you do that? Crazy, crazy, crazy. Kingdom initiatives opening up to begin coaching and helping other churches, not just locally, but across the world. And then the core mission. Listen to me real quick. Just since 2010, over 15,300 first-time guests have visited the church. Since 2010, 15,300. In growing the family, 2,100 people have taken 101. 1,200 people have taken 201. 670 have taken 301. And 544 have taken 401. So that's why we keep offering Superclass Sunday. You might say, well, man, you keep talking about the classes. Everybody's done that. No, you haven't. So we got some work to do. 640 people have accepted Jesus Christ since Expand the Dream. We plugged in 79, almost 80% of our weekend crowd in a small group, connected 600 in ministry. Listen to this. This blows churches away all the time. Did you know that every single weekend at Oak Ridge, 62 children and teenagers serve actively in a ministry? Like every weekend. 62 children and teenagers. We mobilized over 4,000 people. That means since 2010. That's crazy stuff. In school partnerships, in Halo, in Santa's Wonderland, the Peace One Day had 829 people be part of that. We sent folks to disaster relief last year at Hurricane Harvey, and we've also done that in 7 different states since Expand the Dream. We've expanded to 8 different international partnerships in sending people, and guess what? We're opening the door to one more this year, El Salvador. So if you're interested in that trip, let us know. But all of that is to say this. Just since Expand the Dream, we baptized 1,205 people. That's 60% of the people that we baptized have happened just since Expand the Dream. So when somebody says, hey man, did we expand the dream? Yep. We absolutely did. We just didn't do it in ways that we thought was going to happen. Now, the right question next is that, okay, but what about the building? Well, 2017 to this present date, we've reached the point where it's time to regroup and restructure. We did the hard work in 2015 and 16 to get the raft stable. And now we've repositioned and we're heading that way. And we're at a position now where it's time. So do me a favor and look at page 3 with me for just a moment. It's time. So what is Build a Dream? Right there in the middle. It is a 36-month growth plan to build your faith and the church into the future that we believe God is leading us into. So it's time to press play. So one of the things that we did is that during that pause is we formed a brand new master plan team. And we said, we need fresh eyes. I want to start from scratch and get fresh eyes. So we recruited some guys that God gave us some incredible talent of guys that have been professional builders. I don't know, your resumes, Steve Barry and Jim Kitt, probably combined, 100 years experience combined. Thereabouts. And we recruited a brand new team. We said, hey, everything's on the board. Nothing is sacred. Tell us how to accomplish the next phases with absolutely no holds barred. So they've just kind of got together and we started looking at it again. The outcome of that is page 12 and 13. So if you'll look at that real quick, it's hard to see because it's a double page spread. And the animation is just giving you a sense of how the old building will tie into a new building. But the definition of the new building, look at this. We're going to build a 22,700 square foot of additional space. Now that space includes the building and the lobby and the connection and the bath, all of that together. It'll be a pre-engineered steel building. It'll have the ability to seat up to 1,000 seating, a spacious connecting corridor, large lobbies, and did I mention, ladies, bathrooms? Should I say it again? Bathrooms, okay? So why do we need to build? 10 reasons. The building is tired. It's time. If you do me a favor before you leave, if you'll look down at the floor, if you'll look around closely, we put about as much makeup on this old barn as she can handle. It's time. So we need to scrap this thing and start again. The live venue that you're sitting in is in the way of children's ministry. It's got to go. We got to get this out, and we're going to turn over this building to all of children's ministry from scratch. Not Sunday school wings that we've knocked the walls out 5 times, but brand new state-of-the-art. The other reason is because video is the future of the church, and I'll mention that in just a moment. The building I mentioned to you was designed for 600 adults and 250 kids. We've reached that limit way beyond that years ago. The capacity is limiting our growth. I mentioned to you, we go up, we hit the ceiling, we go down because we can't absorb. Listen, let me just put this in perspective. Visitors that come to this church, 70% of them come at 10:30. How many of you attend at 10:30? Let me see your hand, okay? So you kind of already know that it's kind of full at 10:30. We've got room on the sides, but listen, visitors who are far from God don't call the church and say, which is your least full service that I could attend, okay? That's not what happens. They come during the 10:30. That's the main entrance way to the church. And so what we know is that it's limiting. If God gave us 100 new visitors this Sunday at 10:30, we couldn't hold them. And so you kind of know that the simple answer is that when we run out of room in that slot, we run out of the ability to reach and keep. So that's a problem. It's preventing it. We don't have enough room for classes. Did I mention, ladies, that we need more women's bathrooms? You know, we're even toying with the idea, hold with me, I know it's radical, we're toying with the idea of designing a bathroom that you can't look into while you're going in and out of it. I know it's crazy. Revolutionary, okay? Every time I go by that, some people stop me with the door open. Hey, Pastor Brian, how you doing? I'm like, I'm doing pretty good. can we go over here and talk for a little bit? We need a state-of-the-art children's facility. Churches, listen, churches that stop dreaming start dying. Now, I know there will be some people who will probably say, hey, it's enough. We got room. There's chairs in the corner. We can do this. It's okay. Here's what I know for a fact. Churches that stop dreaming start dying. The moment we kind of say, it's okay, we're all right, it's enough, the death cycle has started. So what is Build a Dream really all about? It's about growing your faith and funding and resourcing the next phase of where we're heading. But more specifically, I want you to look at page 8 and 9, because the future vision of the church I've given to you, I know, surprisingly, in an acrostic. There are 5 initiatives. The D is we're going to design and build a new live venue. The R is that we're going to renovate the family space when we get out of this place, right? The E is we're going to engage our city with peace like never before. Listen to me clearly. Peace one day was just a sample. We're just getting started. My goal is that we will have a full-time peace director and we will have a peace center where we are hitting our city with community impact 7 days a week. That's the goal. We will add worship options. Notice I didn't just say venues, because we want to look at every worship option available. And here's what I can tell you. Some of those are coming with online and video being the future of what we do. Think about the 700 people watching us weekly if we tried to accommodate them. It's not even feasible. They couldn't make it into this building. It's not possible. Here's what I know for a fact. It's not a trend. It is the future. So we also need to get into a building that is equipped for video distribution. And then finally, we'll multiply the miracle, and that is, we're not done with multiple locations, but we are done with just one way of doing them. So when we had to close that campus, we stepped back and we said, okay, I still believe that people need Jesus all over the place. So we've got to figure out a better way of doing that. And so we've come up with some ideas around gospel locations. We want to be able to expand into the east, northeast, and south as the first 2 initiatives, but then we also want to look at initiatives for affinity-based locations and gospel points. In other words, it doesn't have to be a full-blown multi-site to get a work started. It doesn't have to be that hard, that complicated, and that expensive. So those are the 5 initiatives of the dream. So what will we do during this campaign? Quickly, we'll have 7 messages where we unpack the dream acrostic, just like we do for our coaching networks. We'll have 7 different member testimonies, one on every single weekend, where you're going to hear some pretty powerful stories of life change. We'll have the small group lessons, which, did I mention, they're in this book. And the small group lessons will focus on the dangers of drift. What happens in our spiritual life and in churches that drift from the mission? We will have daily devotions written by staff members. We will have memory verses that will help you to drill God's word to your head. We're going to have an opportunity to offer share class and the Bible overview. And for the first time ever, we're going to have the Peace Fair. The Peace Fair is where we're going to highlight every missional opportunity this church does and celebrate it, and give people an opportunity to sign up for mobilization that day. And then, of course, we'll take up the Build the Dream offering, which will have 2 components. We've done this every time. You say, what is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. That is on page number 15. So we'll talk about giving a one-time cash offering and then a 3-year pledge. Now, later on, I'm not going to go over all that tonight. Later on, Mark and I will release a video where we'll talk specifically about how do you do that and what are the logistics and what's it look like. But tonight, really, I just want to kind of touch on all this to help you see that there's a lot of pieces to this. Then when we give the offering that Wednesday, because we have Sunday night now too, we will come together on a Wednesday and do a celebration service where we'll have home run heroes. We did that last year. We will have a celebration service, and we will also reveal what God did that night. So here's my goal. My goal is 1,000 steps of growth through this campaign. How's that work? Take out this card. So one of the things that I wanted to do, you're getting kind of a preview of what will happen on September the 30th. Now, this is not new to many of you. I asked for a campaign commitment card. That's the lower half of this. And so tonight, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you tonight to fill out your name, give me your information, and let me know I'm in. I'm in. So what does that mean? I'm going to be a part of the weekend messages. I'm going to catch every one of them. I'll read the daily devotions. I'm going to be a part of a small group that studies this material. Now listen to me carefully. It is critical that we do the material together. If you say, well, my small group doesn't do the Oak Ridge material, follow that. I give you permission to leave that group for this fall. Because I mean it that much. It's too important. It's too important. So I'm going to ask every single group to do the material just during this campaign. And then you can go back to your regularly scheduled program. But during this campaign, I'm going to ask us all to stay laser focused together, taking the same journey, the same steps at the same time. Now, if you have a question for me or any of us, you say, I'm unclear about this or I have a question about this, write it on here because I want to address those. But I'm going to tell you now in advance that our advisory board worked with us really, really strongly on page 14 to hit the top questions that people ask about these next steps. Read through that because you as a leader and as a host and as a small group member, here's what I know for a fact. Your group has stuff like my group. You have the nerds and the free spirits. So what's going to happen in your group? Here's what's going to happen. A free spirit in your group during this fall is going to say this. Hey, man, what about the Kmart space? Why don't we just use that? And the nerd is going to go, excuse me. Page 14. So I give you permission to be nerdy, okay? So most of the biggest questions are there. It's just that the free spirits won't read this. God bless them. We love them, but they just won't. So be the nerd. Read the FAQs. Help the poor free spirits out in your group to say, well, actually, it's right here. But if you have a question for us, write it in because I want to hear that. So when you do that, tear this off. You're going to leave this on the table, and you're going to take this and put it on your fridge. What is this? It's just a quick reminder of all the different growth opportunities we're going to do during the campaign. So it's a quick overview. You're going to get lots and lots of different places you can see this. We're launching a webpage called orbc.net/BTD. And there's links there for exactly the same stuff here to register for a class, take the next steps, whatever God is calling you to do. Get it? Good. We did our dream coaching again this week with our pastors, 10 pastors coming in. Pastors ask me the same question all the time. What's the secret sauce? Most pastors, like all Christians, we want a quick way to get to that. And I have to tell them the same thing every time. Number one, there's no secret sauce. By the way, it's not even a secret. Here's what I believe, and I believe this with all my heart. 2 Chronicles 16:9. The Bible says this. The eyes of the Lord search to and fro throughout the whole earth, looking for those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. And wherever He finds a people like that, He will step in on their behalf. I believe that of churches. What's the secret sauce of ORBC? Pretty simple. Passion. It's passion. It's not programs. It's not preaching. It's not because we're smarter. It's simply because the passion of the people who love, give, and serve because they actually care about what Jesus cares about, the lost. That's what does it. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you so much for every person who took out time in their schedule to come and be a part of this evening. I pray that every single person, start with me, God, every single person would search their heart and say, God, what do you want me to do? What are the steps I need to do during this series? Not just to give money, but literally to stretch my heart to love Jesus more and to care more about people. Help me to know, God, what do I need to do? Next steps of growth. So, Lord, I pray, if nothing else, the whole church, if every person listening to me right now took some steps of growth, this would be amazing. God, you would turn this church upside down. It would be incredible. So, Lord, do what you do best. Do the incredible. Rock our world again. Move us into the next phase, God, for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. God bless you. Turn in the card. Keep the top half. Write me a question. I love you guys.